It's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. Happy New Year, everybody. And this year, my first question comes from I'm Still Alive 813, who says, I've been hearing rumors floating around on the internet of a possible Star Trek TNG reboot. I realize they're probably just that, rumors, but what would your thoughts be if someone, for instance, J.J. Abrams, were, to borrow a phrase, to boldly go where no one has gone before and reboot Next Gen? There is still so much affection and goodwill and nostalgia in the Star Trek fan community for Next Generation. In fact, I'd say there's probably more of that now than there's ever been. That it wouldn't surprise me at all if at some point Paramount and CBS tried to do a TNG reboot. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if I turned on the computer one morning and saw that headline. I wouldn't be surprised. But I think an Abrams-style reboot of TNG, in the same way that he rebooted the original series, would be a little different. You're dealing with different factors there. The reboot of the original series appealed to me, personally, because, think about it, we only got 3 TV seasons of the original series. And we got all the movies, but the movies were different, the movies were later, the cast was older, the tone was a little different, the focus of the stories were a little different. The original Star Trek, with everybody at their original ages, the characters as they were when we first met them, we only got 3 years of that. We got 7 years of Next Generation. We got to follow those characters for 7 full seasons of television. We got to know them. We got to see very many different sides of them. We got to see the actors explore them in all kinds of really interesting, fun, entertaining ways. Like, we got plenty of TNG. So it would be hard for me as a Star Trek fan to say, yeah, I would love to go back and see some more TNG stories, because we already got so many of those. Again, wouldn't surprise me if it happens, but it would feel a little different to me. It would feel less justified creatively to me to reboot Next Gen at this point. Although, creative justification comes later in projects like this. A Mexican Muslim Trump enemy #1. Steve, I have a question. I'm a Latino man, and for a reason I can't explain, out of all races, I find black women the most attractive and white women the least attractive. When I express this to people, they don't think much of it and respond with, you like what you like, you can't control that. I have a white friend who has a racial preference for white women and finds black women the least attractive, and people have called him racist. I've read scientifically reasons why some people have racial preferences, but there are also voices out there that say it's racist. Also, why is it when I prefer black girls and find white girls the least attractive, it's accepted, but when my white friend prefers white girls and finds black women the least attractive, it's racist? Thoughts or advice? I hope I didn't offend anybody or offend you, Steve. I'm sorry if I did. No, you didn't offend me. Here's why I think some people might say that your friend who expresses a preference for white women over black women might sound a little racist. Black women in our culture have been told for generations, for centuries really, by our culture that has always been dominated by white people and white sensibilities and white values and white taste, that they are not attractive, or that they are not as attractive as white women, or if they want to be thought of as attractive to the general population, that they need to take steps to appear more like white women. They need to lighten their skin, they need to straighten their hair, they need to dress a certain way, they need to act a certain way, they need to carry themselves in a certain way. There has been so much cultural conditioning and so much baggage loaded onto black women in this country, in our culture, that it just sounds a lot different for a white person, a white man particularly, to say black women are the least attractive women to me. Now, your friend, I take your word for it. Your friend probably doesn't mean anything by it. Your friend probably doesn't intend to say anything racist or harmful or hurtful about black women. He may harbor no ill will toward black people at all. That's probably the case. But if you make a point to say that, even if you don't mean any harm, that can sound like, oh shit, here we go again. Gee, I think I've heard this record before. You might think that it's the same thing to say, well, I prefer black women, or I prefer white women, or I prefer Latino women, or whatever. You may think that those are all the same, but in the actual context of our culture and our history and the way society teaches us to view people in different categories, it's not the same thing, and it's not viewed the same way. Does that make sense? Patrick Dodds, Steve, many people have talked about desert island movies that parse down your absolute favorites of cinema, but I'd like to go one step further. What would your deathbed movie or movies be? I mean, imagine you knew when you were going to shuffle off the mortal coil and you wanted to revisit some old favorites for the last time. What would they be? Something meaningful? Something gentle? Or both? Or something not in that category? For me, it would definitely be Auntie Mame, the one with Rosalind Russell, and Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. So what say you? P.S. Happy New Year, Steve. Well, thank you, Patrick. Happy New Year to you, too. What would be my deathbed movies? I'd have to throw Sherlock Jr. in there, because Sherlock Jr. really is my favorite movie ever. I mean, if I knew I was going to die and I wanted to watch one last movie before I died, I would have to throw in Sherlock Jr. I mean, I love that movie so much, and it makes me so happy. What else? There are lots of movies that I could say, I would like to see one last time before the end. I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey would be a great one. Again, just a general favorite of mine. Probably a Charlie Chaplin movie, maybe City Lights, or maybe Modern Times, because that has a happier ending. Something like that. I would want a movie that would make me feel good. Not necessarily a movie like an upbeat, happy movie, but a movie that when I watch it makes me happy, makes me feel good, makes me feel like I've spent that time well, that I've seen something worth seeing. I don't know. We'll see how much of a nerd I would be. Would I watch Superman Returns? I mean, do I love the movie that much? Do I love Superman Returns that much to say, if I'm on my deathbed, I want this to be one of the movies I watch before I die? I don't know. I mean, I do really love that movie. Hopefully I won't have to find out, at least for a while. Skullbearer, what do you think of Sherlock adaptations that make Watson to be an idiot? I love the early Sherlock Holmes movies, and Basil Rathbone is my Holmes, but their depiction of Watson just keeps me from enjoying them. Watson's my favorite character, and it's depressing seeing him depicted as stupid. He's Sherlock Holmes' best friend, husband. Give him some dignity. I prefer a more capable Watson. I prefer Watson to be portrayed closer to how he's depicted in the stories, where he is certainly not as sharp as Holmes, but he's not a fool. And I think the Nigel Bruce Watson in those Basil Rathbone movies is not the ideal way of portraying the character. He's usually very bumbling, kind of used for comic relief. And Watson in the original short stories and novels is not that way at all. He's not as smart as Holmes because we need him to be less intelligent than Holmes so that Holmes can then explain things to him and therefore to us. That's really the technical role that Watson plays in the stories. But he's not a dummy. And I think that the portrayal of Watson in the Jeremy Brett Granada TV series is probably my favorite. He was played first by David Burke and then by Edward Hardwicke, and they both managed to find moments where Watson was a little foolish, was used for comic relief, especially David Burke. He kind of hit those notes a little harder than Edward Hardwicke did. But he was never a fool. He was never a clown. He was never shown to be an unintelligent person. He was just maybe a little slow on the uptake when it came to following Holmes's deductions, following Holmes's chain of logic, which is pretty much in line with how Watson was in the short stories. Wicked Savior. Hi, Steve. Are you adventurous when it comes to food? What's the weirdest food you've ever tried? If you ever find yourself in this corner of the ever-melting Arctic, I'll buy you a microbrew and some singed sheep's faces and pickled ram's testes to gnaw on. Gledere Jol, happy holidays, from Iceland. P.S. We still use the old Norse pagan word for Yule rather than Christ's Mass, and amazingly, we still get people insisting that it's purely a Christian thing. Sigh. In theory, I'm fairly adventurous when it comes to food. There's very little I can imagine that I wouldn't at least try once, but in practice, I haven't been very adventurous at all. My actual dietary history is extremely bland and middle of the road, and I would say probably typically American. I mean, the most exotic thing that I eat on even like a semi-regular basis would be sushi. And even, you know, the sushi that you get in the Hagerstown, Maryland area is not even the most exotic sushi. Like, it's even fairly middle of the road for sushi. And sushi nowadays in American culture has become so normalized, it's not even really seen, I think, by most people as like an exotic food. So no, I'm not terribly exotic. But if you put something in front of me and you explain what it is, I would probably be willing to try it. So I would, if we are ever in the same location, and you did decide to buy me some singed sheep's faces and pickled ram's testes, I would try it. I mean, you never know until you try, right? Pastor Gaines. Dear Steve, I don't know how to articulate this, so I hope I make sense. Lately, my little sister, who is 21, has adopted a promiscuous lifestyle, even having orgies with older guys. To my understanding, she's doing it safely and with consent, but it bothers me. Am I a hypocrite? If my mom or sister were getting cream pied left and right, it bothers me. I always imagine my mom or sister being in a relationship that's meaningful and loving and long-term, not casual sex. Most people I know live with the idea consenting people can do what they want, but the moment someone personal to them starts becoming promiscuous, like a mother or a sister, then it's a different story. Is this a contradiction? I know you support consensual behaviors, but would it bother you if a female close to you, like a daughter, sister, mother, etc., no offense, was promiscuous? Does your opinion and personal feelings clash? Do our personal feelings have any value at all, even if it contradicts what we believe with every person? Should I be ashamed of my personal feelings that are hard to control or embrace them? Any advice would be helpful. There are two things that I think, in my completely uninformed and unfit capacity to advise you, there are two things that I think you should realize that will help you with this. The first is you are entitled to feel how you feel. If you feel uncomfortable at the thought of your sister having a promiscuous sex life, you're entitled to feel that way. You know, you see her as your sister, you grew up together, you have very close familial feelings for her, you probably maybe feel protective of her, and you remember her as, you know, when you were kids growing up together, or whatever your history is with her. I mean, and when you think of her in the context of, you know, having sex with a bunch of people in an orgy or whatever, or think of her in like a really frank, graphic, sexual context, of course it's going to make you uncomfortable. That's completely understandable. You're entitled to feel that way. But the other thing you have to realize is that it doesn't matter to her, or at least it doesn't have to matter to her. I mean, she might care about it. She might be interested in hearing what you have to say. But bottom line, it doesn't matter what you think. She's 21, and assuming that she's doing this of her own free will, and it's consensual, and it's with complete knowledge beforehand, and, you know, and it's what she really wants to do, it doesn't matter what you think. I mean, that sounds maybe a little harsh. I don't mean for it to sound like that dismissive, because, again, you are entitled to feel how you feel. But it's your sister's life, and she can do whatever she wants. And I do understand your feeling that, well, you know, when you love someone, when you're close with someone, you want to think that they've had fulfilling relationships and that they have close, you know, intimacy with the people that they love, and then it's not just going out and getting laid. But if that's what makes her happy, if she's your sister or your daughter or your mom or whoever, if it's someone that you care about and they are doing something that maybe isn't your idea of what you would find fulfilling or deep or meaningful or whatever, that's fine. You shouldn't be imposing your idea of what those things are on someone else. It's very possible that your sister or any of the other people, hypothetically, that you're talking about who are having, you know, really sexually promiscuous lifestyles, they may find it incredibly fulfilling. They may find it really happy, you know, that it makes them really happy. And just because you can't imagine how that could be so, doesn't mean that it's not so for them. So as long as they're safe, as long as it's consensual, as long as they're not being hurt, as long as they're doing what they want to do, your personal feelings in that case don't really matter, except to you. And I guess it's something that you just have to learn to accept. See, this is why, in general, I do not want to know anything about the sex lives of my friends, my family, anything. I keep as far away from it as possible because, number one, I'm not interested, and number two, if for some reason something about it does make me uncomfortable or whatever, there's nothing I can do about it. So I try to just avoid the subject as much as possible. But to bring it back around to the first point, I mean, you're entitled to feel the way you feel about it, but please recognize that it's her life and she can do what she wants. And just because you don't think it would fulfill you to live that way, or you don't think she should be fulfilled in living that way, doesn't mean that she's not. Oh, damn. Does that mean it's the end of this answer? Does that mean it's the end of these questions? Does that mean it's time for
the lightning round? Rapid fire questions. Glib and adequate answers.
Oh, all right. Big Ralph Smith, should applying skepticism to feminist dogma be considered misogynistic? Applying skepticism to anything is not misogynistic in principle, but in practice it can be. And I'm a little put off by the idea, the notion that I see batted about quite a bit in anti-feminist circles, that there is such a thing as feminist dogma. I don't know of anything that is dogmatic in feminism. The feminist movement and feminist thought in general is a response to actual sociological conditions. There's nothing dogmatic about it. It's a response to things that exist in our culture, in our society, and societies all over the world that have existed for thousands of years that people have determined need to be changed, need to be reformed. There's nothing dogmatic about it. Joseph Fopiano, hey Steve, Merry Christmas as I'm typing up this question on Christmas. Anyhow, have you seen any of the Tommy Y show? I shit thee not, it's a real thing that exists. Yes, I saw some of it last year, 2 years ago maybe, when I first started getting into The Room. For those of you who don't know, Tommy Wiseau is the creator, the star, the director of The Room, maybe the best bad movie ever. And he also did a YouTube series for Machinima, I think. Where he played video games. He was kidnapped by aliens and forced to play video games, and it was called The Tommy Y Show, and it's really funny and crazy. And if you're a fan of The Room and you haven't seen it, you should look it up because it's hilarious. Bill Bob 313, when I see what he's doing now, I feel bad I rooted for Trump at WrestleMania 23. What about you? I mean, I didn't really root for him. I wasn't really interested in that match, even though that was the big draw for that WrestleMania. Isn't it weird, though, to think that Donald Trump was the babyface in that match? Like, damn, really? Donald Trump was the good guy in that match. That's insane. You could never book that today. Marco Rangis, have you ever actually used that long-ass kettle in the background there, though? Asking the questions that matter. That's me. Mark is referring to this long-ass kettle in the background. And no, to my knowledge, it has never been used. It belongs to my wife, actually. I think it's from my wife's family. And to my knowledge, it has never been used. It's just for looks. It's just for show. It pretties the place up. It gives a little class, Classes the joint up a bit. Mitch Searches. Wrestling question for you. What's your opinion on the hardcore indie wrestling where they smash fluorescent lights over each other's heads, throw each other into barbed wire, etc.? Do you find any entertainment in them actually hurting each other, or are you more interested in the pro wrestling for the storylines? I'm interested in it for the wrestling, and done properly, it doesn't have to involve them hurting each other, and it certainly doesn't involve them trying to hurt each other. I'm not generally a fan of that hardcore style of wrestling. It was big about 15, 20 years ago. People hitting each other with chairs, putting each other through tables, smashing fluorescent lights over each other's heads, barbed wire matches and all that stuff. And it just, in general, it doesn't appeal to me. It's just not my thing. I don't like knowing that the competitors, the wrestlers, are actually almost guaranteed to hurt each other. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that today either. I think WWE does way too many gimmick matches where the risk of someone in the match being injured is way too high. Red Rob, what is the origin of misogyny vis-a-vis atheism? I don't see them as having anything to do with one another. Well, no, in principle they don't. There's nothing about being an atheist that necessitates that you be a misogynist, or even makes you more likely, in principle, to be a misogynist. And there's nothing about being a misogynist that makes you more likely or necessitates that you would be an atheist. But for whatever reason, a lot of people in the atheist movement, particularly here on YouTube, who have YouTube channels devoted to atheist content or that appeal to an atheist audience, are also unrepentant, horrible misogynists. I don't exactly know why. I don't think it has anything, I don't think it's linked directly to their atheism. But that is the state of things. Misogyny is very prevalent and very loud and very visible in the YouTube corner of the atheist movement especially. But it doesn't mean that the two things are linked in principle. Jason Brenet, dear Steve, can you take down that lamp behind you and rub it and see if a genie appears? It might be a teapot, but try. For me. It's almost my birthday. All right, Jason, for you, and since I've got it, for the other question, okay, I will rub the lamp. You ready? Okay. No, nothing. Am I doing it wrong? Maybe I should rub it some other way. Ah ha ha ha, you fuck. Happy birthday. Radical Bacon. So, booze. Is there anything that you won't drink or won't drink again? I generally try to stay away from the hard stuff. That lamp notwithstanding. I don't really drink a lot of whiskey. I don't really drink a lot of hard liquor. I stick to beer. If I do drink something a little stiffer, maybe it's like a mixed drink, like with a vodka or like gin or something, like a gin fizz. I used to drink gin fizzes every once in a while, but nothing too hard. I'm really a lightweight when it comes to drinking. I'm mostly a beer guy. And finally, Tasby12. Hey, Steve, important lightning round question. If you lived in the Star Wars universe, would you believe in the Force? If not, what would that make you? An A-Forcist? Yeah, maybe. The Star Wars universe and how it deals with the Force is really interesting. Because it appears, at least in the era of the original trilogy and now the Force Awakens series, it appears that there's a broad belief that the Force is mythical, that the Force isn't real. And yet, the Force is real, like demonstrably. The movies make no bones about this. There is such a thing as the Force. You can even, according to the prequels, you can even take a fucking blood test to be able to tell whether you're strong in the Force or not. So, I would think if I were a well-informed, educated person that I would have to believe in the Force. Because the Force is real. So there you go. That's the end. That's the last question. Aren't you glad you asked? Hey, before I get out of here, I'm going to do a shout out, and it'll be my first shout out of 2016. And for that, I wanted to do something a little special. I'm taking a slight break this week from shouting out other people's YouTube channels because a few weeks ago I shouted out some people's fundraiser pages, and that was really nice. It feels good to help people. It feels good to give a little signal boost to people who are trying to raise some money to help themselves or help others out in difficult situations. So for the shout out this week, I have 2 GoFundMe pages that I want to bring your attention to. The first is from someone who comments on my videos quite a lot, actually, who has left comments on these You Had to Ask videos from time to time. Joanna, a.k.a. sephirajo. She has a GoFundMe page for her expenses in moving out of her house. She and her husband are separating, and in addition to that, she's disabled, she's a mom, she has to pay fees to break her lease, to move out into a new place to live, and it's just a whole pile of financial obligations and debt, and it's really kind of making life difficult for her. So there's a link in the description box to her GoFundMe page. You can go to gofundme.com/sephirajo. It's easier to remember than the next one, so I'll just say the URL for you as well. And check out her situation, read the description, read the updates, and if you can afford to donate to help her out, please do so. And even if you can't afford to donate to help her out, maybe consider sharing it on social media, because that can help too. The other GoFundMe I want to bring your attention to is by my friend Andrew, and this is something that he set up to help his mother. His mother is an older lady. She's a widow. She is having, again, some financial problems. She's facing the possibility of having to sell her home that she's lived in for, I think something like 40 years, according to Andrew. And he has started a GoFundMe page to help her, to raise some money to help her ease her financial hardship. So go to Andrew's GoFundMe page for his mom. Again, that is linked in the description box. And anything you can give, I'm sure Andrew would appreciate. Anything you could give to Joanna, I'm sure would be appreciated. And again, if you can't afford to give any money to these causes, that's completely fine, but please consider sharing them on your social media. Tweet them or post about it on Facebook or whatever. Let people know that these causes are there and that they can check them out for themselves. Maybe they can afford to give a little. That's the wonderful thing about social media. It allows you to find people who need help that you wouldn't have found otherwise, and you can help them if you can afford it, or if you can't afford it yourself, you can pass it on. You can spread the word. So please consider doing that for both Joanna and Andrew, because both causes, I think, are worth some help and worth some attention. So consider helping them out, either by donating or by spreading the word, or preferably both. And thanks for your help and for your generosity, you guys. You guys are awesome. Also, speaking of generosity, could you find it in your heart to listen to some podcasts? Look at that segue. Why can't I find segues like that for the lightning round segment? That was just gold. Anyway, as you know, my friend Jason Harding not only is the puppet master of Opinionville, but he also produces an awesome series of podcasts under the umbrella of the Lemme Listen podcasts. He does Lemme Finish, which he co-hosts with Finite Atticus. He does American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, which is a fucking awesome improv comedy, sort of supernaturally themed podcast about cryptozoology. That is currently on hiatus in preparation for its second season, but you can go and listen to the entire first season plus some bonus material, and it's just excellent. I can't recommend it highly enough. And he also does Late Seating, which he co-hosts with me, and it's our movie review podcast that we love, that we're so proud of and happy to do. And we look at older movies that are 10 years old or more, that are considered classics, or maybe universally considered flops. We go either way. And we watch them again, we summarize them, we make fun of them, whether we like them or not, and then we talk about what we think. Does this movie deserve to be a classic? Does this movie deserve to be dismissed as a flop? What's the deal? It's a really fun show. It's a great show to listen to. It's a great show for us to do. We have a lot of fun doing it. We're both really happy with it. And I would love for you to listen to Late Seating and all of the Let Me Listen podcasts, and you can do so by going to LemmyListenPodcasts.com. Listen to them all. I highly recommend that you do. You won't be sorry, I promise. Well, that's it for me, everybody. I am out of here. Please, as always, leave a comment on this video to ask me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of them as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, take care, everybody. It is quite phallic, isn't it? Especially if you turn it that way. And hey, look. Circumcised. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it and share it. Subscribe to this channel if you're not subbed already. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel and to help me make more videos where I make penis jokes using old lamps. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Glädjelig jul.
Glädjelig jul.
Glädjelig jul.
Glädjelig jul.